Hi, I'm Roland and welcome to Practical Plastic. So today we will be doing the full build on this beautiful 1/12 scale Tamiya Martini Brabham BT44, and it is quite the kit. Now at 1/12 scale, this is loaded with detail. This is a gorgeous model. This is not a simple model. This is a complex build. So I'm going to do something I don't normally do. Normally in my build intros, I don't show the completed model, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception because when this is done, this is the piece of modeling beauty you can get out of this kit. Now, this is what I've done with it. You can do a whole lot more with this, and I know there are people who can do a whole lot better with it, but the reason I am showing this to you up front, briefly, is throughout the build of this car, you're going to see a lot of complex assembly, a lot of really good assembly, kit design, part engineering, but, and this is your homework now, I did make a couple of mistakes. Some entirely me, did run into some issues, but you'll see all that in the build video. But I wanted to show the kit beforehand because despite me and my screw-ups, you can still build something that is a really impressive display piece for your model collection. So, that being said, enough teasing about this. We will get started. Now, of course, I do want to say, as always, thank you for liking, subscribing. Please do hit that alert button, like, share, all that good YouTube stuff. So, now we will jump into this. All right. So, with the box open, let's take a look at what we have in here. First up, the handy dandy sprue map. So if you're ever lost and looking for a piece, you know where to search on your sprue. So there we go. Always handy. Our instructions themselves for our Martini Brabham. Nice little description of the vehicle and its history. Basic instructions, and you go through your build. Now, the thing in here that I love about Tamiya instructions in particular, one, it's a booklet, but two, every single piece going through the instructions has its color call out, and that's just great because you never have to wonder what are you supposed to be painting. You don't have to go looking for a color guide sheet or make one of your own. Everything is laid out right there in the instruction print. We have measurement guides for cutting the ignition wires, tubing, going through the fold pattern for the seat belts, assembly of the photo etch for the seat belt latch, and then of course a decal guide. Looking good. Tamiya also gives you this handy little tech tip sheet, and just to walk you through how to handle your parts. So, you know, sometimes even after you've built a few, you learn something. Nice to have it. Now there is a transparency in there which is affecting the color hue of the decals, but they're looking really good. So now we have our insert piece in the box, our aluminum air intakes, photo etch, metal transfers, seatbelt, tires. Love these giant rear slicks. Goodyear text on them, front and rear. That's good. We have a collection of thin tubing thicker tubing, really thick tubing, clear tubing, and then a bag with our suspension springs and a few screws. A few smoked clear parts. This is for the cowl, and I'm very glad that they gave that pre-smoked, so don't have to try to do that on our own. These seat parts, these pieces, a little bit of a gummy plastic. That's your seat. You have some drive boots, looking good. Taped together. This is the main body of the car. Top, bottom, beautiful mold detail, looking good. Sprue A, cowl body components. And then we get into the components for our wing on the next sprue. Some metallic components for building up our engine, transmission, some mechanical elements, driver's tub. And then we have some more mechanical elements, brakes, all looking nice. And as you see, there are quite a number of parts here, so there will be a good amount of assembly, and I like that. I like to do me some building. Now into black, some more radiators, suspension elements, a few more drive elements. But what's really nice is just looking at the parts quickly here. No flash. Parts are very clean, so that is good. Should keep cleanup to a minimum, which I prefer. We do have separate pipes for the exhaust, but being that this is a Tamiya kit and it's a little bit larger scale, they will take care to assemble, but I am expecting, not suspecting, I'm expecting that these should go together well. So that's good news. And then on this one, just to look a little bit closer, you can see all the snap ends. These are for all our suspension elements, our rack for steering, so that's neat as well. And there we go. Okay, and here we go, starting off. So just going to work with the body panels first, simply for the reason that everything is going to be added to these. So this seemed a logical place to start, especially since I have to paint. Now you see here I'm using this base plate on the front, just snapping it together as a guide to make sure I'm assembling the front fairing pieces true so I don't have a problem later on. And with that done, I can then move on to the wing and the engine cowl in a little bit. So the pieces are going together well. I am clamping here just because they're long seams. Whenever you have long seams with plastic, you're going to need some clamping. The inside of the cowl does need to be painted flat black, so it's a lot easier to do that with it in halves and then gluing it together. And then I can always cover that up when I go and paint afterwards. Here, smoothing out the join seam so that's nice and smooth, sanding it, then working it with my X-Acto knife to scrape that down, and now no more seam line. And with this all done, going to go into spray paint with this TS26. Now getting into the engine, a lot of parts here. You notice there is some cleanup. I did find on the molds some parting lines and things like that, some minor stuff. Now on the parts here, they have these lugs and slots and indents, and you actually can use those compared to the instructions to orient the pieces for where you assemble the engine block. And doing that, the engine assembles well. Already can tell it's going to be a very detailed assembly. Lots of great surface detail on these parts. So once this is assembled and painted, should look great. Now, moving into the transmission, one thing I did not appreciate until later in the build, and it will become apparent in one of my mistake corrections. This part right here, assembling the transmission to the engine case. You know, the engine is a structural element in this car, and if there's anything out of alignment in that engine assembly, going to be a problem. And I had a problem later on, but you'll see, not a disaster. I was able to finagle my way out of it. But here, getting ready for paint, so I'm going to prime the engine with flat black, and then moving into suspension elements here. These, as well as the valve covers, will end up being semi-gloss black. Now working on some of the bulkheads, front and rear, for what is the central body core. And you can see that painted right up top there. These are the supports for what will be the front suspension. And again, I'm assembling them and then using the body just to dry fit them and make sure that they are assembled correctly and drying true rather than warped and out of alignment. Now this is assembling the steering. You have this almost like polycap material to be the center of the universal joint and the steering shaft. This is a fiddly little assembly, but it does go together well, and the pieces have a good solid fit to them, so it's not like you're flapping in the breeze trying to figure out how it goes together. But it is a dainty assembly, let's call it, and it does work though, and that's really cool. So now with the suspension elements here sprayed with aluminum, now mounting them permanently by gluing them in, as well as the steering. And at this point, everything is securing well. The locators are very well marked. This is having installed the tie rod and making sure that that is centered and that it works well. And now assembling rear bulkhead, and right after this will be the front bulkhead. And this will really give the body some rigidity to making sure things are lined up. Now, it was a little tricky working inside here. It's a fairly big area because of the scale of the kit, but at the same time, it is a little cramped in there, so tweezers and whatnot. Getting ready for the lower front suspension arms, and they are going on to the front bulkhead for their initial contact. And there we go into shock absorber assembly. So I assembled the top, which is in two halves. They had a seam, sanded it, glued it, sanded it down. Did the lower half where the spring goes over in the aluminum color. But for the top, I figured I'd throw in a little extra and do that in gold. And you see that just snaps together, and we have a functioning shock absorber. So at first I decided to use the Testors gold. Didn't like the way that was looking, so went back and used some Tamiya titanium gold, which had a little bit more of an alloy look instead of just, gold. And now doing some touch-up on some minor pieces. This is some detail work for the front bulkhead, the battery, which, funny story with the battery, you'll see a little bit later. I was painting the top contacts on the battery, and I actually dropped it into the paint bottle and had to redo the battery. So fun stuff. But the big thing I want to talk about here is, you notice I'm going between a lot of different colors. This is the blue where I dropped it into that bottle right there. Good job, me. And now snapping the suspension elements together, starting with the front springs. But what I was going to say was, you notice I'm going between a lot of different metallic colors, detail colors, just to try to spice up the detail a little bit and make it apparent so that it does not all get lost in the sauce, so to speak, during the assembly. Now, working on some of the detail bits for this rear bulkhead. The engine will be attaching to that, so I have to get those done. I painted these rubber black. This is just some padding for the sides of the driver tub. And then we can mount the battery. And that's looking good. Now this is the main fire extinguisher, so propped that up on some tape, primed it with white, sprayed it with the Tamiya red, and that gives a real nice clean look to it. Did a little detail painting, and now for some extra detail, whipped out my Gundam hazard decals, and going to apply these to some of these reservoirs, I guess, for the front bulkhead, and just to give them a little more detail. Assembling here some of the bits for that driver compartment, or tub, I should say. It's not much of a compartment. Very tight for the driver in there. And that is all going together. The fire extinguisher here is all done, so I'm just going to remove that from the tape. And then I can just glue that and drop it right in there, and it is all done. And I think that's looking pretty good so far. This was a finicky little assembly. The top clamp for the battery. Had to sort of wiggle and jiggle that into place, and then use some Mr. Cement to just bind up those seams. And now with that done, we can pop in the tub. You have to spread the body a little bit, and then it just drops right in there. It locates very well, and there we go. And now we can put on the front bulkhead like so. This is attaching the back half of that lower suspension arm. Alright, so still continuing with the front suspension here, and in the meantime adding some of these detail parts now which have been worked up. So on they go. Starting to look a little bit like a car, little bit. But putting this suspension together was I just found this so interesting, the way the different elements, the way the kit was designed, I should say, the elements, the way they snap together and then fit into their receivers. You know, if this thing was not engineered and molded just right, this would be a disaster. And, you know, credit to Tamiya, and as I expected, it goes together well, everything lines up. It is a very delicate assembly, and it is very delicate once it is done. I mean, big surprise, it's not an RC car. But I love being able to do something like this and really learning how functionally the suspension works. So this is putting together some front radiators and this little subframe that they will attach to. Now you can see that's a delicate assembly, but I snapped it in and just let it sit there so that this way I can align it, make sure it's true. And while that's drying, in the meantime, I will clean up the seam lines on the radiators. And then for a little detail contrast, I'll paint those. And you can see I popped off the subframe now that that's dry. I detailed the radiator frames with gunmetal, and now attaching all these pieces for the radiator assemblies. And once that is set, can finish up the painting. And again, as I said before, just trying to work with different colors here through subtle means of color gradation and tone to help bring out the detail. So now getting to work on the front knuckles here, and the wheels will attach with nuts onto screws. These are the screws going in to attach to the knuckles. And the last few detail parts here before getting ready to return to the front suspension. Now here attaching the brake calipers. Again, I did them in red because I felt like it. Now there is a gap between the driver's tub and the top shell, and it wasn't looking so good. So I just used some strip styrene here, cut a length, put some glue along the tub, and just drop this in there to close up that gap. And that's it. Very simple solution, and you know, makes a difference. And now with the bottom of the main body component in there sealed up, we are moving on. More detail parts. You know, the kit is over 300 parts, but boy, oh boy, loads of detail, loads of detail. So now with the final Testors gloss red on those calipers to really give them some pop. And then the ball joints snap into the upper and lower suspension arm. So now with those snapped in, we can attach to the tie rod and steering. All right. This anti-sway bar was a little tricky because it was little pieces, flopping around on little pieces, but it went together. And then we have these support arms for the radiators. Getting those in place and making a delicate assembly, maybe not so delicate. Now for the instrument cluster, they do give you the metal transfers to back the decals for the gauges, but what I decided was to skip that and just cut the gauges out, not set them as decals, but tack them in with my liquid cement and then use my liquid cement on top of them to create the illusion of lenses, because once that dries, it will be clear. Like so. And what you just saw me doing was straightening out or taking some of the curve out of the tubing. Just pulling it through the fingers will relax that. And now attaching them to the back of the gauge cluster. Very delicate assembly. I used my heat shrink tubing here, cut a few segments, because you can see those wires, those tubes are kind of going all over the place. So I bundled them with the heat shrink tube to give them a little mutual support, let's call it, and to keep them from being such a mess. Now, while that's drying, I started on the tires, sanding them down. They did have this center seam, so a little work with some fine sandpaper, got rid of that, and then popping the wheels together and gluing them in. And with that done, we can start painting in the lettering. So because the tires have a well-molded letter relief, it's not so difficult to go in and do the painting. Yes, it takes a steady hand and patience, but about 15-20 minutes per side of the tire, and was able to get it done. And for any mistakes that I made, I was able to go in there with my sharp X-Acto knife, which you'll see in a little bit, and just clean up by scraping off the paint from the tire. Very simple, like so. Okay, thought I'd step in for a minute and do a little commentary because as you've probably noticed already in the build montage, whole lot of assembly. Now, the detail on this is really great so far, and that's to be expected with the larger scale, the somewhat higher price point for the kit, but it's really nice to see that it is in fact there. You know, I just love the way this instrument gauge looks. Again, all the suspension. I have added a few little things. I used some Gundam decals to add some detail there to the top of this tank, which I'm not really sure what that tank is. I love the tubing that comes with the kit. I will tell you, this assembly here was very tricky to do for the instrument gauge with the little feed-off lines and routing these wires to the back here. You know, you're dealing with tiny connection points, delicate pieces. This did come loose on me a couple of times, had to reattach things. Haven't seen quite yet where these go. I believe they just tuck into the back here. Not sure how that's going to work out. I might just make a hole here with my hand drill and run those in there. See, I've already attached these tubes on the rear. The tubing is hollow, it is flexible, it attaches well, but the thicker tubing does have a little resistance, and here I did get a little kink. I didn't even try fighting with it because I didn't want to start breaking stuff. But everything is aligning well and going together well. So that is wonderful news. You may have noticed as well, at some points, I put things out of order that I was actually doing them. That was just for editing purposes, as much as I try to show the way I actually build it. Because some of this was dealing with small pieces, I wanted to keep those pieces in context so you could see what it was I was actually building. But I am jumping all over in instructions. This is true. There is nothing wrong with the instructions. I'm just doing that to try to make the most of my time between painting and assembling. So looking back through the montage, you may notice that as I'm painting, my painting is a step or two ahead of what I'm actually building, so that as my building catches up, my pieces are pretty well painted and detailed and ready to go, and now it's just a matter of doing the assembly. I like to work that way. It is disjointed, let's say, but with practice and, I built a lot of models and experience, you can do that. It certainly requires studying the instructions to make sure you don't run afoul of anything, but I just like doing that because it keeps a constant mix of painting and building. I don't like running into hard stops where I just have to stop everything and do a whole bunch of painting. I've been doing more spray painting on this than I had anticipated. I thought there would be a lot more airbrushing, but I've been able to get away using some of my different Rustoleum sprays, the flat black to prime, the flat aluminum or metallic aluminum for like the driver's pan, a lot of other pieces, Tamiya SemiGloss black spray for a lot of the suspension elements. It's just been working well that way, so that's what I'm doing, and pretty happy with the way that's going. I am, talking of paint, I am deviating on some of the color choices. I'm trying to add some different metallics in places to break up the black. Otherwise, it's basically black, silver, white. And, when all the colors are the same in areas, you lose the detail in those areas. That's just to introduce contrast and keep that detail alive by using the contrast colors. I sprayed the body white to start with because can't do it during or after all this assembly, but I want to do the decals now so I can just cover some of these areas that are not to be glossed over with saran wrap, and then clear gloss spray, this Tamiya TS13 clear, to seal in those decals without having the whole end and everything else. And of course, I'll have to do the wing and the front end in similar fashion to get those set before they are assembled. So, all going well. Back to the montage. Alrighty. Alright, so after all the talk of spray paint, going to do some airbrushing. So this is this dark metallic gray from Tamiya. And after having primed the engine with the Rustoleum flat black, spraying on this Tamiya color, and now returning back to assembly for the many little engine bits that will go alongside this beast of an assembly. Now there's a lot of little detail here that, again, on the theme of trying to use some different metallics and playing with some different shades so that the detail does not get lost. Again, going with the red calipers to match the front. But this is building up well, and it's looking really cool. And I have to say, this was big relief getting those valve covers on after seeing them sit there for a long time. Now, assembling the distributor, lots of wires. This is like putting an octopus together, but I laid out the wires as cut to the lengths they were described in the instructions, and then just worked around and put the wires in. I did work with the natural curve of the tubing and the wires so that when I attach everything, natural curve will lead them right to place them close to where I need them to be. Why fight it if you can work with it? So now assembling the fuel injector rails, the air intake rails here, and attaching the wires. A little dab of CA glue, pop them onto the points on the receiving ends, and they slide right in, no problem. Yeah, definitely tweezer work, but here's one side done, and I just think that looks so cool. And with that all done, now adding the aluminum air intakes. So glad the kit came with these because they just look outrageous on there. And then last but not least, sliding in the coil. And there we go. Taking a look at where we're at this point of assembly. I'm liking it. And it's decal time. So these are Cartograph decals, which are, very good decals. And you can see I'm making a stupid mistake right there, sliding my decal off the wrong way so that the large circle there could flip over on itself. Genius move on my part there, but not a tragedy. Simple to unroll that and slide it into place. It's a large decal, so got to work it to get the wrinkles out, and there we go. This front decal, because it's sitting on a lot of curved surfaces, compound surfaces, a little trickier, a lot of mark fit to get this to settle down, but settle down it did, and it was looking good. Adding some more of these little trim decals, and looking to do as much decaling as I can here so that I can clear coat everything, and it is done. Now for the top, the engine cover, see I'm using either side to center each other so that I have them on aligned. Adding in decal numbers. Again, needed a lot of mark fit here because these decals are sitting over a lot of bolt heads, but they settle down. And now just dry fitting the body panels together so that I can line up these pinstripe decals. And then I clear coated. And some of it came out great. And mistake number one, I don't know what happened, but disaster on this front decal. So, disaster over here. Disaster over here. So I got a mess on my hands now. So it's repair time. Sometimes you learn more about your hobby fixing a mistake than having it come out right. So fortunately, I had colors that matched the decals. So I started detail painting in to cover the color runs and replace where color had been lost, covering up with white where there were color runs, redoing these pinstripes, and just taking my time. This was a full morning's work to put these repairs in, going in with white to do some final adjusting, working with the lettering, and then going off course a little bit to say, addressing some final deficiencies with extra decals. So I looked at the sheet, and I have those Brabham decals to cover up pinstripe errors, and that red line there to cover up some of the problem on the front. I resprayed the clear, and everything was fine. So whatever happened there, I really don't know, but that was a learning lesson. That was my mistake number one with the kit. So now attaching the engine, which was pretty cool because you clip it in on the bottom and it has those two pins to snap it in. And now it's starting to look like a car. Attaching more tubing, getting all of that in place. It's getting a little tricky working with the tubing because you are in rather confined spaces now. And you can see me even breaking out a second set of tweezers there to help get things together. Threading lines through various tight areas, but it does all go together well. Now working on this bracket here, which will start blending, I meant to say, into doing the headers. Now I mentioned in the beginning I hope the headers would go together well. I figured it would be neat to do them in gunmetal instead of just black. I primed them in black. I just misted on the gunmetal and then did them with some flat clear, and I think that gave a pretty cool look. This is a interesting compound assembly of pipes into the collector, and getting these to line up. You can see it takes a little jiggling and fiddling, but tacked in with the Testors cement gives me some working time, and then fitting them into the slots on the engine block. Now sliding through this lead pipe, and with that lead pipe in place, can now put on the exhaust tip, and that is one side done. Now getting into some of the arms for the rear suspension, including the anti-sway bar for the rear. And here building up the rear knuckles. Quite a little assembly for these rear knuckles. They come in halves, then you got to clean up the seam line, then running the screw into this receiver assembly to the plate that's going to anchor the wheel. And then, which would give me a little bit of a headache later on, you have to attach as separate pieces all the pins that will receive the suspension arms. So you end up with this prior to paint. Now putting in the half shafts, and I'm about to run into my big mistake number 2 during assembly, and that is working with this rear suspension, because I first ran into some trouble getting the arms hooked up. Then this issue came up where these 2 arms I attached as per the instructions, and the top arm was pushing the top of the knuckle back, and the lower arm did not reach because I realized they have the part numbers reversed in the instructions. So, simply a matter of seeing which is the right size, removing them, which was not easy, and reattaching them, which was not as much fun as putting them together the first time. And with that done, now we have a functioning suspension. So that is good news. Now, I did break a pin, which was my big mistake. Fortunately, the kit provides you 1 extra pin. So I cut off the broken pin, used my pin vise drill to drill out its hole, receiver hole, and then attached the new pin to the arm, and then glued it into the knuckle because it was very tight working space, and now we have working suspension on both sides. Imagine that. All right, on to mistake number 3. Now, looking at the instructions, we see the assembly of the transmission, and what I've pointed out here is the attachment of D11 and D20 to make the end plate of the transmission, and then attaching it to the actual end of the transmission. And this is where one problem comes in, because if they are not perfectly aligned, that end plate to the transmission, when you go to attach the rear wing, as I found out, your rear wing will be completely crooked. So getting this sighted perpendicular to the long axis of the car is really important, and either the parts should have been keyed better or they should have been noted in the instructions, but I have to say I think Tamiya could have done a little bit better to warn you, unless, in fairness, to my own experience with building cars of this nature, maybe that's something I should have realized, but nevertheless, I think even just a little note in here about the importance of mounting this piece correctly certainly would have made my life a whole lot easier. And there is another part to this, which we're going to take a look at. So after assembling the transmission is mounting the transmission to the block, the engine block. And here too, as I've indicated, this mounting step, again, is really important, because if that transmission is not sitting perfectly flush, square and true and perpendicular to that engine block, this too will not only throw off your rear suspension geometry, it will throw off how the rear wing attaches to the car, and it may, as in the case with my build, I didn't realize it at the time because I thought I had the transmission mounted flush, but there's a slight skew to my transmission right to left, which now when you look down at the top of my car, it looks like the whole car curves a little bit along its length towards the rear wing. So here too, I think, and again, like I just said, this could be my inexperience with this genre of car, but I think if Tamiya just could have put a little note in there about how critical or tooled the pieces a little bit differently so there was no way you could build it without it properly aligned, I think would be of great benefit to the building experience, because everything else is so great. So now, having noted those two things, let's take a look at my car and see what I did to come about with a solution. So now looking at the car, what I did, that transmission end plate, I just worked a jeweler's screwdriver under the lip of the part and popped it loose. And now with it loose, but the arms for the wing on, I can use the crossbar of the roll cage and the crossbar of the wing to twist that end plate when I reattach it and align them so that those two bars are parallel. And if they are parallel, then I know my wing is pretty much level. So after a little sanding and scraping to get the part smooth, redid my glue, and now with holding it in place, I can twist it a bit and get it straight. And with that done, on goes the wing. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Okay, now it's seatbelt time at long last. So this was a very finicky, fiddly, and I have to say, a bit annoying to do. Never done seatbelts quite like this before. And, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of photo etch to begin with. I just am a klutz with it. But trying to thread these self-adhesive, semi-self-adhesive seatbelt strands through the photo etch and folding them back on themselves in some places, such as here. This was, I think, one of the most challenging aspects of the build. Again, at least for me. It's my first go at it, so I think that certainly speaks to a lot of the test of patience to get this done. But that said, I think they look really good when they're done. I don't see how this could have been replicated using any other type of material or molding directly into the seat material, which is a soft plastic anyway. So to get this kind of detail to match with the rest of the kit, this really was kind of the only way to go. But as you can see, lots of tweezer work. If I didn't have two tweezers, I don't know what I would have done here, aside from jumping out the window. But again, you know, joking aside and the frustration I had while doing it aside, it does look great when it's done. And I'm sure someone who is more experienced, or if I had more experience doing this, could have had them come out a little bit better. But be that as it may, I did do a little bit of touch-up because I didn't neatly fold neatly enough some of my strands. But there you go. All right, so got the seat in there. And as you can see, it's almost done. So just a few little things to button up. Have to do a few pieces to finish with the driver cowl. Obviously put the wheels on. Detailed up my steering wheel. So, gonna get to that. And after all the fun of doing those seatbelts, insert sarcasm. No, happy with the way they came out, but that was a finagly little job doing that. Anyway, but gonna do that, and then we'll get to see the final for this wonderful build. Alrighty. Alright, so here we go. It's that final build reveal time for Tamiya's Martini Brabham BT44B 1975 in 1/12 scale. And there we go. At long last, I should say. But it is done. And wow. So it doesn't fit on my usual little rotator, so I have it on this Lazy Susan, so can fit it all in frame without things hanging off. Now, I did a little talk about some of the things I ran into on this, most notably, and I'll turn it this way so we can see all of that, the mishap of the melted decals, so much fun. The mistake of the rear suspension arms, again, loads of fun. And of course, the crooked wing in the rear, again, loads of fun. But we also have special bonus mistake number 4, which is when I went to attach my side mirrors onto the cowl. Not the side mirrors, I'm sorry, the windscreen onto the cowl. I was holding it in place. I added my Mr. Cement S to chase into the seam. It also decided to chase under the windscreen and under my fingers, and I had 2 big fingerprint marks into my nice paint right here and right here on either side. So that led to corrective action number 4, which consisted of I sanded and scraped out the imprint of my fingers in the paint, and then I went into my spare parts box, and these decals that you see on here, this black grid, that is actually from a Revell Ford Bronco kit. That is the seat pattern, which I didn't use in that kit. But I cut out 2 sections and I laid it in there, and I thought, you know what, for the driver, maybe having, and I dull coated it, so maybe having, a little disruption of this reflective white surface here of the canopy might add a little safety to driving the way these vehicles are driven. So whatever, there it is. So correction number 4. But that aside, final impression of the kit. Well, I think, and again, not to brag, but I think the kit speaks for itself, because wow, it is quite a piece to look at when it is done. Now, in terms of assembling this machine, it is certainly going to call on your hobby skills. Now, I don't ever claim to be a modeling master or hobby master, but I think I am pretty resourceful and I am pretty obstinate to get something done in putting what skills I have to work. And I have to say, this called on pretty much everything I had to make this to the point where I have it now. And like with any model, that is the key point, getting it to where, 1, you can get it, and 2, where you would like to get it. Being a perfectionist nut job to a point, I always feel I could have done better, but I've said in other build videos, being a perfectionist is not the worst thing in the world. Certainly trying to do the best you can with something is a positive thing, but that can lead you into a negative hole. But the way around that is to look at it as, what, could I have done better? Yes, but what can I learn from where I went wrong, or where I deviated from where I wanted to go in this build to help me with another build down the road, or if I run into the same issue, to help me through that issue. So there's something to talk about. Lecture point for the day. Now, in terms of those assorted hobby skills that you need, well, a number of things. You have to be good working with tweezers to do this kit. Certainly those seat belts, and I'm going to take the cowls off in a little bit so we can see everything in a little bit more detail. Certainly doing those cowls, seat belts was a challenge. Without tweezers, I don't know how it would be possible to get them done. I also relied on tweezers in several parts of the assembly, as you saw in the montage. It is, as I said, a complex and complicated assembly, yet it assembles well. And just to reiterate that point, what I mean by that is you really have to pay attention to the instructions. You're involving working suspension components, very detailed engine, steering linkage, all little things like this, which are major assemblies, but you have to pay attention to what you're doing. You have to take care in doing the assembly, yet the parts are located well, they are keyed well, they fit together well. There's some cleanup on the kit. Yeah, there was some mold steps and things like that I went after and cleaned up. But the parts are basically, molded clean. So the kit goes together well, but you really have to pay attention to what you're doing. I would not by any measure recommend this as a first kit. You need to have some experience assembling things, period, before trying to assemble a plastic model of this complexity. So that was the build experience. But for all the effort it takes to put it together, good effort it takes to put it together, when you are done with it, you really have something special to look at. I went and I painted in the lettering on the tires. I did some extra decals, mostly to cover my mistakes, but to add a little bit more to the kit. Of course, it has all this outrageous wiring and fuel line detail around the engine. Love that. All these things that just add to it. And the fact that you have working suspension up front and in the rear. That blows me away. I think that is so cool. And of course we have our functioning steering. And to show you the steering wheel in there, you can see that turning as the wheels turn. Good old-fashioned rack and pinion. Gotta love that. Now, these are not things you will find on a 124 scale model. These are things exclusive to larger scale models, simply because it's almost impossible to replicate in a smaller scale. So that is part of the privilege and pleasure of doing kits like this and moving up to the larger scales. That being said, having the experience of building simpler kits and the more typical 124th or even 135th scale will certainly give you a good preparation for dealing with something like this. I think this kit is an excellent example because to the point of it is very easy to mislead yourself thinking, oh, it's a bigger scale, the parts will be bigger, it'll be easy to assemble. No, many of the parts are bigger, but that also means you can have a lot more small detail parts thrown into the mix. So, not a point to be overlooked. You will still be doing a lot of detail work. And let's be honest, if you are going into a scale like this, don't you want all those little detail pieces? Because without them, a 1/12 or a large scale model is going to look pretty bad if it doesn't have a lot of detail going on, because it'll just look very blah and plain, and it'll look a lot more like a toy than a, however you want to call this, piece of awesomeness on your shelf. So that was a lot of talking. I am going to pause the camera for a minute so I can move things around here and take off the cowls. They do pop off nice and easy. In fact, I will do that while the camera is still rolling, just so you can see that I am not making that up. There we go. And now we have the car in the raw. So I'm going to stop the camera and we'll take a better look at everything removed. All right. Okay, so here we go. The car in its unmasked presentation. And I like looking at it with the cowls on because you have that sleek classic F1 shape, but I love seeing cars from an anatomical mechanical perspective, let's say, seeing all the linkages and the guts and how this thing would work. And, you know, with this, you really get to appreciate that, and you really get to see everything that's going on in there. And I just think that is really tops. Now, the other thing with this too is that I love, after all the work you spend doing the build, working on this detail and getting everything together and trying to do everything you can to bring out that detail and bring all the functional aspects to life, by the design of the kit and the nature of the subject of this car, you can take those cowls off, and all that work you did is there for open view, so you can appreciate it. You know, you can display this on a shelf, cowls off just like this, and it looks great. Cowls on, it looks great. So you can do it either way, and you can enjoy it for its different presentations equally. And I think that's wonderful, because after what you invest in a kit like this, in terms of its, you know, its monetary value, but your time and your effort to get this to completion, you know, it's great that you can appreciate everything that went into it. Now, all that said, I am so glad this kit is done. Because, you know, correcting, and mostly I say that, it's not that I'm coming away with a negative impression. I am not. It's just, you know, the mistakes that I ran into all kind of popped up towards the end of the assembly. And, you know, after all the effort I put into it, I started to get this feeling of, really, what's next? I just want it done, and I want to dodge any more, you know, catastrophes that could pop up for this build. And that's something I think that just comes up with these complicated, more extensive builds, because there's a lot more going on, so there's more space for things to go wrong. But at a certain point with any kit, at least for me, you know, I just get this feeling like I think I'm reaching my finish point with it. And when I had all those mistakes pop up, especially the last one with the side mirrors that I talked about in the beginning of this, you know, I was just kind of like, come on now, I've had my fill. I've put so much effort into it, and I'm so happy with the way it's coming out. I just want to have it done without any more of me botching it. So yeah, here it is. And like I said, those were problems I introduced by what things I did during the build. But I am so happy I built this kit. I've never done a car like this. Jumping into this genre of car straight to the 1/12 scale. Like I said, I specifically chose Tamiya because of the quality and reputation of Tamiya kits. It certainly did not disappoint on those aspects. But yeah, I don't think I'll be doing another one like this. I enjoyed the experience, but I've had enough of the experience. So there we go. That's all there is to it. Then, I know it took a little bit longer for me to get this video done and out there for you to see. You know, life has its boomerangs it throws your way, and its potholes and speed bumps and whatnot. So I had a while where, you know, I wasn't feeling so great, and I was not up to giving this the focus and attention that I needed to do it. So I had to step away from it for a little while. But like books, the wonderful thing with the hobby is it's there when you are ready to work with it. So I was ready to work, and now it's done. Haha. All right. So that's that for this one. As always, thank you for watching, and I will be back with yet another build following up on this guy. Going to do something a little simpler. You know, I like to change pace. If you notice, if you watch my build videos in order, I tend to like to change pace. You know, something more complex, something a little simpler, or something newer, something older, because it just keeps everything feeling fresh to me. So you'll just have to wait and see what that is. All right. So like I said, until then, thank you for watching. And as always, enjoy your hobby. Alrighty.